Welcome to this webinar. I'm Dr. Natalie Stott. I'm a clinical psychologist and host of the Mastering Therapy podcast. As a response to the podcast that I ran on how to use AI in your therapy sessions, I covered my experience of using Heidi Health, the AI scribe. You might have already began using Heidi, or you might be wondering what the fuss is all about. And so this webinar is going to be a very practical how to use it, what steps you need to take, and whether it's worth paying for the pro version or not. As I said, I'm Natalie. I've been using AI probably for about the last 2 years, and I've been using Heidi Health for the last year consistently. I've trialed lots of different AI scribes, and the reality is that Heidi Health is just one of many. There are lots out there that offer different functions, and so it is worth giving them a look, because it might be that Heidi isn't the best one for you. I do not work for Heidi. I'm not paid to endorse them. I am simply a clinical psychologist that has got a bit of experience in using AI and feel confident in being able to teach and train others in its functionality. If you work using more of an assessment-based system, it might be that you want to look at some of the other products out there. But Heidi Health is primarily a transcription tool. So what I go through in this webinar is a little bit about Heidi, GDPR and consent. This is really important, not just for us as clinicians to be confident about, but also for our patients, for our clients. They need to know exactly where their data is being kept and how long it's being stored. And they need to know that they can feel confident that it's private, that it's being protected. I'm going to walk through how to set Heidi up effectively so that you can get the most out of your transcriptions. And then I'm going to go through the different features and compare the various different plans. And then finally, I'm going to spend the bulk of the webinar going through note and documentation templates. So this is anything from your letters, the referrals that you generate, maybe formulations that you write for clients. Maybe you use ACT or EMDR or IFS. And so your notes, you want to capture them in a certain way. How do you go about teaching Heidi to do that? I'm going to go through that with you as well. So why use AI? Maybe you're already sold on it, but I have to say that it is the number one thing that you can do to streamline your practice. It will save you hours and hours of your time, and consequently, it will save you money. If you think about an hour-long session, you might do 50 minutes with a client and 10 minutes to write your notes. And let's say you charge about £100. Effectively, your notes are costing you £16.70. And if you see 15 clients in a week, that's going to be £250 of your week spent on doing notes. Now, obviously, we need to have good notes. We need to spend time writing our notes. But in my experience, those 10 minutes were not just 10 minutes. I used to spend the 10 minutes frantically rushing around writing the note. And then I would be spending 10 minutes at the end of the day going back and filling in the gaps. Consequently, my notes were not ordered. They weren't always accurate. And they weren't very well thought through. So using something like Heidi has enabled me to be a far better therapist, because I can offer something that is more accurate. I can offer clients extra services, and I'll go through what those are. And I find I can be a bit more present in the sessions. I don't need to note everything down or rely on a substandard memory, because Heidi records all of that. So imagine if you could spend that note-taking time on minimally checking that your note is good enough, and the rest of the time is spent on formulating, on thinking through, reflecting on the session. I think that is how we can become better therapists. So the first section is just on GDPR and consent. So for those of you that are new to Heidi, this was founded in like 2019, 2020. And it was originally designed, I guess, to offer these personalized healthcare solutions. So ways of reducing administration for healthcare providers. And over time, it has gradually evolved, and they're adding in new features all of the time. So the Heidi that I'm talking to you about today in Feb 2025 is probably going to look different to the one we see in a year's time. Essentially, what it's a transcription tool. It is a piece of software that listens to you and your client. It has voice recognition, whatever that is, voice recognition software that can tell your voices apart. So you don't need to let it know who the client is and who the therapist is. It will basically listen to the both of you in your session. And then what it will do is produce a transcription. It does not record an audio. It produces a transcription of what was said in the session. And then, depending on the instructions that you give it, depending on the templates, it will order that in a certain way. And then what you can do is then you take that note and upload it onto your system. So how and where is data stored? And this is what they say about GDPR. I'm doing this because I'm in the UK. They've got lots of statements for, depending on which country that you're a part of. Lots of people say, well, how do I make it GDPR compliant? It is GDPR compliant. You don't need to do anything. And obviously companies have to jump through quite a few hoops in order to meet those GDPR standards. And you can check out their compliance and safety pages if you want more information on that. Consent. Now, the common question that is asked around consent is, do you need to get consent from clients if you're using AI? Do you have to ask them specifically that you're note taking and the scribe is going to do that? And how do you request it? So the short answer is yes. And the answer to how you request it is that you ask them. So Heidi has this section on their website. There is a resource center and you can access, if you see down here, they have a patient explainer and a consent form. I actually don't think their consent form is very good. So I'm going to give you some headings that you can use to populate your consent form. Somebody asked that if it's already incorporated into your practice and your privacy policies and your terms, do you need a separate consent form? And I guess it's really up to you. If somebody is already consenting and they've got it written there, then technically you could argue that they have consented to it. But this is a very new thing for people. And it's one thing when you call up customer service and they tell you we're going to record your calls for training and monitoring purposes. And it's another thing consenting to having your therapy session transcribed. So we really need to be sure that clients are aware and that they have a right to opt out. So if you do that, you might want to have a checkbox if you don't want to add another form in. The way that I do it personally is when I do my intake for a new client, I will have a separate form for AI consent. And this is what is on my form. These are headings that you can use. What is Heidi? How Heidi works, data privacy and confidentiality, your rights and your consent. And then when I see somebody, I actually also check in with them verbally that they knew what they were signing and what it does. If you're with someone face to face, I have had clients want to see how it works. And so I show them the note that it generates afterwards. I think that's really important in building trust and helping people feel comfortable with it, because at the moment it's relatively unknown. I'm going to go through how to set Heidi up effectively. This is what you will see if you log on. So you can see I've labeled all the different tabs. So this section here is your microphone. You need to let Heidi know how to be able to listen to you. If you use headphones, then you need to use the Heidi Health app, which you can download for free. If you're using Heidi on a web browser, you won't have that option. You'll have to use speakers and it will have to have a microphone that can hear both of you. In your note will be displayed here and you've got the level of detail that you want. Heidi can give you a really, really brief summary. It can give you a really complex summary. And there is the default template that you choose, which you can amend in settings. I call this the different tabs bit. This is the context one. This is notes, the note that it generates. And as you use the Ask Heidi button down here, it will generate different tabs, each one with the different query that you've asked Heidi, so you can see that and access that clearly. And then finally, aside from all the settings and the shortcuts, which are really useful, you can go into the community page, which is where the templates are. So when you're looking for a template, say for a letter or for a particular note, you can go there and you can access other people's templates. And from that point, you can either use them or you can edit and amend them. And I'm going to spend a section of this webinar going through that. One of the questions that people have asked is, how do I do an assessment or do a letter, but when I've got multiple sessions as part of it, I haven't just got one? And the answer is that, well, there is an answer to it and it's a workaround, but I would say that this is probably one of the downsides of Heidi, at least in my opinion. I would really like there to be a checkbox so I can check, session 1, 3, and 5, and then pull that session into a template that I've got that might be, say, my initial assessment. Heidi doesn't have that functionality at the moment. They say they're working on it, so watch this space. But what you can do is use the context function, and you can see that in the tabs. What you would do is you would put in your context, the pasted note from a previous session, and you would have to label it accordingly. You can also use context for lots of other things like observations or whether somebody else was in a room, or maybe part of the patient's history that you want to be incorporated into the note. Settings. First of all, your settings are located here. This is pretty self-explanatory, just worth going over if you are new to Heidi and you want to make sure that your settings are set up as best you can. So this has got about your consent pop-up. Do you want Heidi to ask you every new session whether you want consent or not? You've got your default note template. So I'm a psychologist, so I tend to have this template that I use mostly after my sessions. I tend to use a detailed level of notes, and you can amend that depending on what suits you in your practice. And then we have got your default dictation. So the other thing that Heidi does, aside from transcribe, is that it has a dictation tool. And if you're on the free plan, you have this unlimited. The dictation tool can either be smart, where it will generate what it thinks you're wanting to say. So you know how when you're dictating, you might make an error in it. The smart function will iron that out, whereas word for word dictation is literally word for word. Brain hemisphere. If you're on the paid plan, you'll have access to both. The free plan, you only have access to the left. This is just a way of interpreting the note. So if you have the right brain hemisphere checked, it says that it means that it's a little bit more thoughtful, it's a bit slower and can infer meaning, whereas the left brain is just for like those short, fast, snappy. It's not going to be doing any kind of in-depth interpretation. So maybe not as good for complex sessions. And under data management, it's got whether you want to delete your sessions and then how long you want to delete them. This is really important for your consent form, as I shared earlier. Another feature it has is memory. So if you go down here, that has a replace function. You can customize your word library. So if you are using a particular phrase or a particular word that's commonly misspelled, you can automatically ask Heidi to shorten it in your outputs. So for example, instead of acceptance and commitment therapy, replace this with ACT. And then snippets. I'm going to go on to explain what snippets are, but these are really fantastic things that you can use in the session. You can input your pre-arranged piece of text, maybe something you say in sessions that you want to capture in your notes. This might be around confidentiality. It might be around note-taking procedures, or it might be at the end of the session, how you close out a session and what you say, at the end of a session. Features. Is Heidi worth paying for? You've got the pro version, which is £400 or about, I think they do a £49 a month plan, or it's free. And Heidi says that it's going to be free forever. So if you just want it to take notes, you can stick with the free version and you get 10 pro actions. And all of the features that I talk about are going to be those pro actions. There is Ask Heidi, you can create templates and you can generate documents from your note output. But these are things that you only have 10 goes with in the free version. And believe me, it goes very, very quickly. If you use my affiliate link, then you can have access to the pro version for a whole month and experiment around with it to see whether you want to invest in it longer term. So ask Heidi to do anything. This is the magic button. Once you have generated your note, you can use Heidi, the Ask Heidi Anything button, as a bit of an assistant. So you could ask it to make adjustments, you could ask it to remove or add parts, you could ask it questions. It's one off and won't save it to memory. Here are a list of the questions that I have asked Heidi, and I'm going to show you exactly what it comes up with, because I think this is really where the power of AI is, that we can become better therapists by asking it for feedback or helping us think through something in more detail. And in the next slides, I'll show you how we do that. Somebody asked, can we send summaries to our clients? This is a great way of using Heidi. So you could, in that ask Heidi to do anything, you could say, give me 5 bullet points that I can send my client that summarizes the content of our session. And you can see here, it's actually done a really good job. It's picked up the therapeutic things that we did. We discussed the 3 circles model. We spoke about what I'm going to do and what the client's going to do. We set homework. So it's capturing all that, and that takes about 2 minutes to be able to email them, generate that and email that over to them. And I think that's what I mean by AI being able to give me something that I can give back, give extra to my clients. Creating templates. This is where the bulk of this webinar is going to be. What is a template? So essentially in Heidi, there are 2 types of template. There is a note template and there is a document template. Your notes are after your therapy session, how you want that information displayed. And the document templates are your letters, your referrals, your formulations, your summaries that you then might want to generate, your reports. Essentially, the template is the brain of the AI. It is about how you want something written, the order that you want it written in. And so you need to build this. It takes a bit of skill in knowing how to do it, but I'm going to go through it so it is a lot less overwhelming. Where do you begin? What I would do is think of your 5 most used documents, the documents that you find you go to most often. So maybe an initial assessment, maybe you generate a written formulation to a client, maybe you just have a template for your regular session notes, or if you're using something like EMDR, you're using some EMDR templates, maybe separate ones depending on which phase you're working with. So section 4, I've just gone through the other sections. We spoke about the AI instructions. This is the most important part of generating a template. This is what guides Heidi on how to handle the information in your note, in your template. So I almost see it as like the bit that you're kind of giving them those ad hoc instructions to. So for example, you might say, insert the patient's past therapy history. Now, if you just ask the AI to do that, you're not giving it any parameters, you're not giving it any boundaries. So you need to use these round brackets in order to educate it. So you might say, never use bullet points, write the summary section below, use full sentences. Just remember that direct and clear instructions work best. And I'm going to show you in the next couple of slides exactly how you can identify where these round brackets are and how much detail you really need to give. And you'll see on some templates, they are filling half of the page with AI instructions. This is important because if you don't give it these instructions, you're leaving the AI up to its own devices. And we really do need to give it explicit information and tell it where to get that information. Otherwise, our note isn't going to be reliable and it's not going to be accurate. So here are my tips. Be really specific, use consistent language, use natural language, just be really clear and experiment with different formats and syntax. Do you want your notes in bullet points? Do you want it in line by line? Do you want it in paragraph format? Finally, I'm going to spend the rest of this webinar looking at the note templates walkthrough and the document templates walkthrough. You'll see here, this is where you find your templates in the community. So you can see, is there a template already that I might be able to use? And you can go through, you can look by your profession and you can see what people have come up with. And then you can use that and add it into your note. This is an example of a note, and you can see that actually here is the default note, and you can change the template depending on the one. You've got your one transcript. You can change the template depending on what you would like. So if I change it to usual one-to-one sessions, it will follow a different set of rules and instructions. Creating specific notes depending on the modality that you're using. A really good place to start, if there's not one that you would like to use, is rather than starting from scratch, is to maybe use an existing template and amend it. And a good workaround is using something like ChatGPT to advise you. So you could take a template that you want to use, or you could take a concept that you'd like to use. For example, if it's ACT, you can put that into ChatGPT and ask it to give you a list of instructions that you can input into Heidi. I think that's a really simple way and a little hack of how you can make that process a little bit less daunting. The key thing to say is you are going to have to tweak this over and over again. It's never going to get it right first time. And that is where the time comes in, really. But once you have got it as you would like it, you're set. I'm just going to give you an overview of EMDR templates because EMDR sessions are complicated. They don't follow a linear pattern. So I'm going to go through my workaround of how I do my EMDR sessions, and I'm going to show you an example of what my EMDR template looks like. So as you can see, I've just shown you my case conceptualization template, but this is for processing sessions, so phase 3 of EMDR, and you can see that with the right prompt, it's been able to capture the negative cognition, the positive cognition, the SUD rating, and it's even been able to capture some of the processing in where the client went and what the client said. Your notes are one thing and your documents are something else. So it's exactly the same. You don't have to relearn another thing if this is feeling overwhelming. You can just generate a document based off of the note that you have got. And there are lots of different ways that you can do this. So for example, if you want to generate a letter or you want to generate a report, the way that a document works is that it uses the information in the note. So it relies on an existing note to run the query efficiently. So if you create a document template and that becomes your default template, it will still generate a note. And in the tab bar, it will also have your document. This is an example, following, say, an ADHD assessment, you can go to the create button and then you can either do it from scratch or you can create a template. You can post in there, create a letter to a psychiatrist, click the enter button, and it will show you a template, a letter template, and you can decide whether you're going to amend it or you're going to use it. You can also use Heidi for supervision or reflective practice. Here are some ways that you can do that. Here are my top tips. So lots of troubleshooting and lots of queries that people have, but these are my top tips for how to use Heidi most successfully. I really hope that was helpful. If you would like to access the full version of the webinar, you can go to masteringtherapy.com and you can watch it for £20. You'll have access for 3 months. I'm also offering one-to-one sessions for people that would like me to walk through directly with them, and you can get access to that either by emailing me or on my website. Leave any comments if you have any other pieces of feedback. If you haven't listened to the podcast, you can search Mastering Therapy on any of the major podcast platforms. We've got lots coming up, especially around the area of AI. So I hope to see you there.